We are live. Welcome to another podcast segment of Black Bear Medicine Bag Show. Tonight, once again, with great honor and pleasure, I have the same guest, Peter Estrada, and he will be talking about some of the things that he's achieved and some of the things he's went through as a kid and some of the knowledge. On that note, I will say, Dagote, Dousti na Tanesi Dunela, Losichin Kiviavu. All right, the floor is yours,
Okay,
Peter. Go.
Dios in Tioco Utesia, Haisa Infoane. Um, that's just basically the follow-up greeting from yesterday, and also the second part is, how are you doing? Uh, I just want to talk a little bit about, I did get my bachelor's degree from Arizona State University, uh, from the College of Business, and it was in economics. And then I have a master's from Northern Arizona University, a master's of bilingual and multicultural ed. And it took a long time to really learn the Spanish and get the Spanish down. And I actually started teaching before I got the master's or anything. So we talked about that a little bit yesterday. Since then, I've taken, all kinds of little classes here and there, like coding on Khan Academy. I took the cybersecurity through the Cisco program. Uh, and most recently, I was very fortunate to take a class at University of Arizona, the Pascal Yaqui tribe, the micro campus. And we did most of the class by Zoom. I took Indigenous data and spectrum sovereignty. And what that was about, we finished just last Thursday. So the class is about basically ownership of your data, ownership of the airwaves. Spectrum is, your 4G, your 5G. Spectrum is your radio waves, your electromagnetic waves, and the Wi-Fi, the fiber optics, the cable. All that ties in. It really went through a lot of stuff in the class. We had a great teacher, and she's an attorney and graduate of University of Arizona College of Law, and name's Dara Blackwater. She's definitely the advocate for spectrum sovereignty for the indigenous tribes, because not only are we talking about they have these government charts through the FCC where they sell spectrum and the FCC makes money off spectrum, but no money comes back to the tribes and no money is received by the tribes. So there's a big issue there. And then also the second issue is most tribes don't even have Wi-Fi on the reservation. Uh, Most of the companies don't run the cable to the reservation. They try and avoid the reservation as far as planting like fiber optic cables and stuff like that, because they're looking at as a business matter for money. And so what she has done is she's dealt with FCC and other federal agencies, and she's fighting for tribes to have spectrum rights and sovereignty over all their data and what I mentioned, like with the Wi-Fi and the other stuff like that. Occasionally, you might find, I believe she mentioned on the Navajo reservation, you have a center, like a learning center, and they got Wi-Fi to it, which was nice. But she does have some videos on YouTube if you look them up. I think she said she had to go 30, 40 miles to get a signal before uh, on the reservation so that she could make a phone call. And like I said, she's a really big advocate, if not the biggest advocate, from what I can tell. And she's a great teacher. But all the tribes, there's over 500 tribes, I believe 572 tribes. And a lot of the readings we did and the videos we watched, things we learned, the tribes in Canada, the tribes in Mexico, especially the American tribes, mostly and with the FCC, there needs to be a big fight and push because one, as she's pushing for, and the fight is, the tribes should own sovereignty over the spectrum rights. They should own sovereignty over the airwaves, over the Wi-Fi, over the 4 and 5G, over the internet, and also the tribes should be paid when the FCC is selling stuff that is going above their land because if it's really sovereign tribes and it's really land that belongs to a sovereign nation, it's kind of strange that the FCC can just kind of sell what they want. And then the FCC has these big charts, and they have this little tiny box of spectrum, in other words, for radio use, that's allotted to quote unquote Indian country, which is kind of insulting in itself. You would think with FCC, BIA, and those type agencies, by now they would have came at least called indigenous territories or um, trust territories, reservation trust territories, land owned by uh, indigenous peoples and tribes. And the original, all this kind of just started with allowing indigenous tribes, or like, I believe the first one in Arizona, may have not been the first, but one of the other students were like, was the Apache had a reservation station or a reservation radio station, which was illegal, on their own land. So that's what the class is about, fighting for the rights in all those areas. And it's just really, I didn't know at first, but it really turned out to be quite an interesting area and quite another, what I consider another violation in just walking over indigenous sovereignty, indigenous rights, you know, sovereignty as a nation. It's supposed to be nation to nation, but instead FCC is coming in and selling something that should belong to the tribes. In all reality, I would think it would belong to tribes. And I compared it to the Teapot Dome scandal in South Dakota, where Congress allowed certain people, you know, to use the land there to take the oil. And of course, it was their friends and cronies that got the leases and got rich and got the oil from the land. And with the spectrum, it's kind of the same thing. If they're not given any say to the tribes, and they're selling it. And FCC has been selling this since 1994, I think. They've been making money, and we're not talking, a few dollars here and there. We're talking, I believe it was $250 billion FCC takes in on this. So this is a major thing going to be in the future. Plus, as what I also would say, it's like there is a digital divide, and the digital divide, this is what separates it. Uh, when you or I, or especially like me, going to school, taking classes, trying to do stuff on Zoom or broadcasts like this, if we were on the reservation, the chances are we wouldn't be able to do it. We'd have to drive and drive and drive before we could do the show. So it's also a violation as far as the United Nations Human Rights Charter, the indigenous rights according to the United Nations. We're not supposed to be discriminated against. We're not supposed to uh, not have access to things that people who are non-indigenous have, and that's called UNDRIP. It's United Nations. There's a whole thing they did, I believe, in 2007, and just going through that, and like looking at each right, and then you think, wow, why does the United States of America ignore this? Why is Canada kind of getting on board? And in Mexico, actually, the Mexican government, the United States of Mexico, changed their constitution to allow some of these spectrum rights to the tribes over there, and they actually put it in their constitution. So America, or the United States of America, is way behind, and I kind of see it. It's just that second-class citizenship thing. Because if you think about it too, a lot of the people on the reservations, they still don't have water. What is it, like 32 to 35% don't have running water, don't have plumbing. And this is just another example. It's like, another thing they're being denied and not treated as equal citizens with citizens of according to the United Nations, it would be like it says any indigenous person, you know, things um, that indigenous people should have that they're not getting. And of course, the United States government can kind of say, like, well, and I think they do. I think they look at the United Nations information and kind of say, like, okay, well, that's nice. Have a nice day, you know. And so I'll be working on this more in the future, taking more classes. They have a really good program there. The Yaqui tribe, it's the Pasqua Yaqui tribe micro campus. It's in conjunction with the University of Arizona, and the particular class I was talking about is actually, through the College of Law too. So hopefully, we're going to see a lot more attorneys coming out of the tribe there, or even attorneys from people from other tribes are taking these classes too. I know there's some of this offered in Oklahoma University, Masters of Laws. I think there's a State of Washington has a Masters of Laws in Indigenous Laws. Uh, I just kind of see what they're doing in Tucson. And they're really getting it together, and they're really, uh, you know, trying to. The Pasqua Yaqui tribe is really trying to not just help their own tribe, but all the tribes. Indigenous people want to come there, other tribes, and even people who aren't indigenous too. So we can go on to the next one, I guess.
Okay, I was just going to elaborate that, I used to live in Canada, and some of the things you mentioned I could relate with because on the reservation over there on the Lustigos Res, they had running water, they had Wi-Fi, they had like everything that in United States on the res you didn't have. I'm like, what? And the mother of my child, she was like, yes, we weren't fortunate enough to have everything to the point where they didn't even have to pay for the running water or the electricity because they had to deal with the government. I realized like over here in the United States, like it's a bigger fight to this day in order to have those things. But my second question to you was we were talking about growing up, indigenous. And did you remember anything as far as like the traditional plants or remedies? Because this is the Black Bear Medicine Bag shows as far as aloe vera or using the cactus as plants. Or, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
using it. Go ahead.
Okay. So we talked about it a little bit. I remember. Um, I remember with my grandmother. Okay, let's do that one first because that's probably the earliest memory. Is my mom told me my grandmother, uh, when me and my siblings would get sick, like asthma, we'd have a lot of asthma attacks, that she would put some kind of liquid medicine on our backs, and then she would like take, I don't know, it's weeds or reeds or something, and hit them on our back to help us be healed from the asthma attacks. And my mom, in her mind, because I mean, my mom does have Native American too, but in her mind, because she was raised by a medical doctor, her uncle here in Phoenix, when she did come to Phoenix when she was younger and first came, she came with her uncle. And, so to her, she was kind of like, what my grandmother was doing is witchcraft. That's not medicine, you know, to my mom. And so she always told us that story because I don't really remember it exactly. I just remember my mom telling me the story about it. But then there were other things. My grandmother did have a garden. I remember now. I remember she had mint leaves. We picked fresh mint all the time and ate it. Uh, and she had a lot of other things in the garden. Quite a lot of neighbors used to steal stuff out of the garden. I remember. I don't remember any particular type things as far as uh, other medicines there. I remember the mint was also used in albondiga soup, the meatball soup. And, but we used to love just eat it fresh out of the garden. And then when we moved to Chandler, I remember my mom had us plant a bunch of aloe vera that we used for. We got into that house and we got a pool. Excuse me. So we got
Now,
swimming pool.
now,
So
does the Pascua Yaqui have medicine man or a type of person they go to as far as dealing with the plants to this day, or is it more or less it's from the elders if they trust you to be passed down? Because I know some native nations they have to trust you to know that hey, you're going to keep this medicine and I'll pass it on to you. Or certain people are born they just have that gift. Are you familiar with that concept?
yes, that's what I would think. Uh, like the elder that I'm out at one of the graduation uh, ceremonies in Tucson, Felipe Molina. He wrote a Yaqui dictionary, but he also is supposed to definitely be big in the herbal medicine. I did get to sit down, have eat, and have dinner with him, and um, sorry, and I think it is more of a thing where it would be like you're saying, this elder is going to pass it down to who he chooses. It's not. I mean, maybe if I said, "Hey, I'm really interested, want to come study with you at your house or something," maybe that would have been okay. But I didn't, go forward on it then because that was the first night I met him. I got to sit with him, eat dinner with him, and I had studied the Yaqui dictionary and worked on the Yaqui dictionary at U of A. So I was like, what, what are we doing different at U of A? With our Yaqui dictionary as compared to the one you wrote like 10 or 20 years ago. He also wrote a history of the Yaqui people. Uh, I haven't really read that, but I saw that just the other day. But he definitely was the expert type that it's kind of like the same with the dances and stuff. There are you're usually not going to be doing the dances unless an elder is teaching you. It's usually an elder in your family. I have a cousin in Yuma. Uh, she told me, her grandfather, he was one of the Yaqui dancers there in Yuma, and we actually met through Ancestry DNA match. And so I didn't even know her at first. And she's like, "Oh, yeah, I asked my grandfather, and he knows, of your family and who they are and stuff." And her grandfather happened to be one of the dancers, and she sent me some different pictures and stuff, which that's another thing, too, is we learned in my Yaqui language class in the first one I took, and they had cultural aspects. You don't take pictures, you don't share pictures. Where it's like she's probably sharing it because, oh, this is my cousin, he's Yaqui, it's okay to share. Where with the medicine stuff too, it might be they're not going to tell you unless you are a member of the tribe or you're someone they're teaching it to. We went to that in class too, talking about the cultural stuff and the mask and the what they wear during the dances, um, and all of that. I remember in class, and that was uh, I I don't know. I think how far back. I think it was 1997. Um, that is very much like clothes. You're not really supposed to share this, unless it's another Yaqui tribal member, you know, or if it's a family, a
Sorry to
relative.
be rude, but I can't really hear you. Can you just turn your mic up? I think your mic dropped.
Okay, go ahead. Maybe I'm going off course. Can you hear me?
Hold up. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, yeah. For some odd reason, I don't know what happened, but it seemed like the mic dropped. Hold on, let me see if I can try to bring it back up.
Okay. Probably because I was sharing sacred stuff, which I should not share.
Yeah, if you go out and come back in, they'll probably pick back up because it was going out when you were talking.
Okay. Did you want to remind me of the question, or do you want to move on
Oh
to?
yeah, we could. Oh yeah, I was just gonna ask about Yaqui medicine. Do you know any Yaqui medicine, basically?
Um, Yeah,
That,
so I guess that's kind of where I was going, but we did the aloe vera for sunburns because we had just got a pull one. If we got cut or wounded, things like that. Where we moved to was kind of newer. There were still rabbits, and it was a new development in a kind of what had been farm field stuff like that. Okay, so are you hearing me? Okay.
yes, I hear you. I hear you. Well, no, the thing is still going out. I have to hold it up to my ear. That's why I was wondering if you could go out and come back in. So then it would be
Okay.
able to
You
put you
want me?
back in as soon as you log out. And then can log back in because sometimes it drops. I think it dropped.
Okay, let me try it.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Okay. I turned my mic off and on. Are you able to hear me?
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I still can't hear you. Can you hear me though?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm trying to get closer to the mic on my phone. I think there might be a
Here we go.
problem with
Oh, okay.
the mic on my phone. I don't.
All right. I turned up mine, so maybe it's just something else going on. Hello. Okay, okay, you could go ahead. Continue.
Okay, so as far as medicine, I'm not sure if I really remember too much more. I know a lot of indigenous medicine that I may have gotten to, which I don't really remember too much, but I remember with my mom, her grandmother, who is descendant from the paw monkey. Her grandmother was sort of a country doctor back in West Virginia. So I remember they would put together some concoctions and stuff, and my grandfather would say to use what was it when we had bad ear infections? He would say to use squirrel oil or something in your ear. I never tried it. He used to, and there were some other things that's his mother, my great grandmother, that she did, and I just can't remember them all right now. Maybe they'll come back to me later for a different episode or something. Have you ever heard of anything like that, like squirrel oil or something? They basically take the grease, I guess, from a squirrel and use it in their ear when they have ear infections.
Uh, I didn't. I missed what you were saying. What were you saying, sir?
My grandfather, he said when I had bad ear infections, he told me what, and I know he used this. It's like they would get, I guess, the lard or the oil or whatever from like a squirrel, and they would put that in their ears to heal the infection.
Okay. All right. Can you explain what the Yaqui what the deer represents? Like the man with the deer head on basically
Uh,
how
well, yes, and just real basically what is the deer, I believe the motto, the deer is dancing. The deer enters into the heavenly realm, into the Tewa or the flower world. It's very similar to what I've heard with other Native American tribes. Uh, I can't go too far into it because I really don't think I'm supposed to share too much about it. As far as I believe it's kind of one of the restricted things. But I noticed in studying other native groups and other tribes that it was similar to their type of the same thing they were doing, you know. And then I know there's other dances which, as far as the Easter dance with the Yaquis and the one in Guadalupe, that's a little different with the Pacola and stuff. That is really a mix of Catholicism and uh, from the priest, the Catholic priest that started in Mexico, I believe around 1768. And, he mixed the Yaqui religion in with basically the Pasqua, the Easter from Europe. I don't believe he was Spaniard. I think he was German. So, you know, so when they do the whole Easter ceremony in Guadalupe, it's a mix of both. And you have well, you can see they have where they carry Jesus or carry Mary or carry the cross. So it's kind of, I was raised Catholic, so it makes it a little easier for me. I know also we have St. John's Day and what the priest did in 1700s Mexico too, or Nueva España. He taught them like on St. John's Day, you go down to the river and you cut all your hair off in honor of St. John the Baptist, and you get baptized, and you do that every year. But that was a European thing, or that was a thing I believe, he instituted. It's not really about St. John or St. John the Baptist. It's about let's get them to cut their hair off, so they look more like Europeans, I guess, or so they get in the water once a year. Because I think the Yaqui traditionally let their hair grow just like a lot of Native American tribes, and they really didn't want to cut it. So this is kind of the Catholic, you know, working it so that we could, well, and a lot of stuff I read, and the friars and all of them, the different two types of Catholic priests that they sent. It was basically let's Europeanize them, let's colonize them. But I still do cut my hair like every year about St. John's Day in the summer, and I basically shave it all off. And I wondered why. My dad used to do that because when we were kids. I'm like, why do we have to get these crew cuts, or why do have to get our haircuts so short in the summer? But he never said. I didn't learn until I was much older and read a lot of the history, and it's like, well, I automatically do it every year. It's like ingrained now.
all right. Where do you see the Yaqui people going in the future? Do you see them being bigger and buying more land, or expanding into new communities? Because can you break down what's the difference from Guadalupe, Jaime communities versus the res, or is it just where you live? It's pretty much the same, or is it different? What's the variation?
Well, with the Yaquis, it's totally different. As my godfather used to say, who was Yaqui too, he said, the Yaquis are a man without a country. They didn't have a reservation here. There was no reservation. What reservation they have now was given by I think the San Xavier del Papago took part of their reservation and gave it to the Yaquis because they said we're sister tribes. We're going to give them some land so they could start in 1978 and 1979 when Anselmo Valencia started to get the federal registration for the tribe. And So that's where it started. There were little pockets of Yaqui people all over. Besides Tucson, there's Old Barrio, New Barrio. Um, there was Guadalupe here. There's also Pinhamon, which is by McClintock Road, and I guess it's Hayden over there, Hayden and McDowell, or McClintock and McDowell. In Tempe, it's McClintock Road, and Scottsdale, it's Hayden Road. And so there was a development there, Pinhamon, which was greatly ignored. And also with that group, they also mixed with some of the other natives around there, which were Navajo and stuff. And I went to school close to there, to St. Daniel the Prophet, uh, in seventh and eighth grade. And I met a lot of students and a lot of people that, were part Yaqui and stuff like this. And it's like, that's one of my friends over there. I'm like, so, he grew up over there. And he's like, yeah, the Yaquis are there by the corner, because he's like, every Saturday we'd go over there and, and eat green chili burgers. Then there's also some little pockets. There's a pocket over here close to where I am on Buckeye and it's off of 75th Avenue. And I drove by it a few times. I'm like, okay, that's a Yaqui neighborhood. What's going on? So all these unrecognized, you know, places where Yaqui people were living. Unless you were Yaqui, you kind of knew, or unless you're Mexican, it's like a lot of Mexicans now that aren't Yaqui or not, and they'll say like, oh yeah, it's a little Yaqui neighborhood. So the tribe has bought some of the land in Tucson to claim back some of their old neighborhoods, and that was just last year. They're very proactive in that. They're very proactive in the housing. They build new houses. I'm not sure what's going on with the housing though. As far as it doesn't make sense to me. They built and continue to building these really nice new houses, but apparently, if you're a tribal member, you would still have to buy them, which makes no sense. You're not really getting housing. You're buying a house. So even though it's a nice house and in the Ford 600,000s, I don't see why tribal members are going to move there when they could just go off the res and maybe get something for 250 or 300,000. So that's kind of an enigma, which I still haven't figured out. I have read the stuff and I watch the meetings sometimes and learn a lot of stuff that way. Also, uh, through some of the sites on Facebook and stuff. So the tribe is proactive. And this is kind of, I guess, my soapbox or my 2 cents is with the Yaquis and probably with other tribes, I'm assuming, but especially what I've seen with the Yaquis, is it seems to be kind of a protectionism, like I'm in, or you know, our council is going to protect the people that are already in. The whole friends and family deal. It's like, let's keep people out because we don't want to share the pie. And this is my personal opinion, and I'm sure probably make people angry, but I kind of see it, you know, happening before my eyes. And it's kind of like, well, we're going to, whether they have a resort and casino and a second casino and a second hotel, but, I don't see a lot of people living in Guadalupe and, and receiving, any monies or funds. I see the state, the county, other groups receive funds from the tribal gaming. What happened to the people of the tribe? What happened to the people? What happened to the Yoeme Yaquis? Shouldn't they get something? Don't they deserve part of the pie? It's kind of like, well, we pay the state off, we pay the county off, we pay a few groups off, but and they're so proactive. It seems they're ahead of everybody else in the ID, so they're willing to help other tribes do their travel IDs. Apparently, the Yaquis came up with a good template on that. And I don't mind helping other indigenous people and other indigenous tribes, but what about all the people we're leaving in California saying, haha, you can't join? You know, and or the people in Texas or even New Mexico. It's kind of like if it's a big family, in which that's all a tribe is, if you trace everybody and they connect like a jigsaw puzzle, it's kind of So why are we determining who's going to be a have and who's going to be a have not? And I think it's real hard once you get in that golden chair and get up there in that golden council. You know, just it's like who are you going to help naturally? Your friends and family, but mm, that's only a natural thing. But it's like, how about throwing some crumbs to the rest of us? And I'm not talking specifically about me. I'm just talking about people I see, people I know. I know people in Guadalupe probably have more Yaqui DNA and blood than me, and they won't even join the tribe or try because they've tried before, and it's like they've been rejected. And uh, so it doesn't matter how progressive the tribe is. It is. They're doing a lot of good things. They're helping a select group of people, but they're ostracizing and keeping out a large group of people, which definitely you know uh, should realistically be able to join. And I don't
Do
want to.
you,
I mean, I've probably said too much. They
yeah.
probably
Do you
kick
think
me
that
out at this point.
speaking Yaqui is one way in, just like if you speak Spanish and even if you're half Mexican, you're accepted in, or is it a little bit about the blood quantum? Is that the biggest thing? Do they pay attention
Oh,
to the blood quantum, or it just
um,
depends on each individual?
I think it's about blood quantum, which is, uh, and I mentioned this when I was in the class, uh, last few weeks. And I remember there was someone from the Yaqui tribe that's in Tucson there that I think they work for the tribe, and they were praising blood quantum and how great it is. I'm like, oh, that's a bunch of baloney. It's like it should all be lineage because it's not blood quantum. It's like if your great grandpa was a full blooded Yaqui, it doesn't matter how much you got or whatever, or your grandpa. Uh, it's still family. It's kind of like they told me many times when I was there for stuff in Tucson. It's like, well, it all fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. So it's like you're in, you can't get out because you basically have to cut off part of your body or cut off part of your family. And so the blood quantum was just a white man's invention, a colonizer's invention to basically, get rid of the bloodline or DNA, or just blood quantum is basically just so that the government can reclaim the land eventually. And it's the same like we spoke before, like with the native speakers, with the indigenous speakers. If you don't have enough indigenous speakers that are fluent in your tribe, the federal government has right to call and say, we need your land back. And the Yaquis don't have much land. They are definitely on the lookout and buying more land. And like I said, they're burning up some of the old neighborhoods around Tucson and stuff. And I've seen them put a few things, I think one in Coolidge, Arizona, and a couple more I read about and heard about recently. But it's kind of those places that they're kind of claiming back to, it's always the closer to Tucson, the more chance you have. And there's typically been a Tucson versus Yaqui Guadalupe, issue for a long time. But then on the other hand, it's like I talked to somebody in Tucson and she's like, oh, yeah, my mom and dad are from Guadalupe, but I live in Tucson, or whatever. It's like, um, it's, I don't know the best way to put it. I don't know what the cure is. Well, I guess let's say you do the DNA or the family history. I go back to a guy that on my mom's side that came from Ireland, you know, and he has thousands of descendants in the U.S. And whenever we find a blood DNA match or something with that last name, we usually communicate and we're nice and helpful and share and stuff like that. Why should it be any different with the Yaquis or with any indigenous group? Because I talked to a former uh, chairman, council chairman. I talked to him online a few weeks ago before the class started. He was basically saying the same thing that I'm saying, and he said for years he tried to do that. It's like let's get the Yaquis that live off the reservation, the Yaquis that live out of Guadalupe, the ones who live in all these other undesignated areas, and let's support them and help. And like I said, they are starting to do that. I believe there was three different places. I know Coolidge was one of them. I don't remember the other two, but it's always still, it's like the ones closest to the reservation, and we have a cemetery, which you're probably familiar with in Tempe, which is a Guadalupe Yaquis cemetery. And, my great grandparents are buried there, and my great great grandparents are buried there on both sides. I remember asking there, like before, like they said my great great grandfather on my nana's side, they said he's not buried there. His wife is, but he's not. And my mom said, I've been coming to this graveyard since uh, she got together with my dad and bringing my nana there. She'd have to drive my nana, and that's probably 1950s. And every time they would go, my nana would say like, "Okay, Ernestina here's buried. My dad here's buried. My mom here's the tree." So that tree's still there. But when we tried to do our paperwork to join the tribe, the cemetery, whoever runs it at that time, was like, "No, he's not buried there. He wasn't Yaqui." It's like, and my mom's like, "Well, since I started coming in the 1950s, bringing my mother-in-law to visit her parents' grave, she said they're both buried there, and my grandmother, was a witness." So there's a lot of nitpicking, I guess, too, and even like I mentioned yesterday when I went over there to Guadalupe, I was doing something, and this one girl from, oh, I think I was working over there at the Guadalupe Learning Center, and this one girl, she's like, "Give me a ride home," and I'm like, "Okay," and I gave her a ride home, just real close over there to the Learning Center. Um, I was working as a tutor at that time, and she's like, "Don't ever tell them again. Don't ever say it. Don't ever say you're Mayo." And I'm like, "Why?" And she's like, "Oh, they will kick you out of the truck." And I'm like, "Why are you telling me this?" And she's like, "I'm Yaki Mayo." And she's like, "I can tell from looking at you, that you're Mayo too, but you said it blatantly at work at the Guadalupe Learning Center. It's like in front of people who will tell on you, and they'll get you kicked out of the tribe." It's like,
Did you say
well,
Mayo, like from like your cousin tribe, the ones that's from Sonora, or the one from Yucatan Peninsula?
no,
What?
the Mayo from Mayo River in Sonora.
Okay,
Yeah.
I need to specify because people always get those mixed up in life, and I needed to specify that. I've heard that too in my family that we also have Mayo people too. I'm like, whoa, that's crazy, and they're cousins basically. But maybe there was a
Yes.
weird something happened.
Yes. Well, it's like my grandfather said that we were Yaqui Mayo from Red River or Rio Rojo, And um, the thing with the Mayos, I've read stuff, and I had it somewhere years ago where I read it, that the Yaqui specifically, in order not to marry into their own clans, married with the Mayos. So they would go pick a wife from the Mayo tribe, which was the next river over, and then they, marry her. And if it was a man, you bring your bride back to thank, and or maybe you had to stay over there with the Mayos, or depending how they. I don't know if they're done matrilineal or patrilineal back then, but basically they intermarried like that. And the Mayos are also a sister tribe of the Hopi uh, in Arizona, and the Huichol is a sister tribe linguistically of the Hopi in Arizona. I know the Navajo tribe in Arizona. They have a Mexican clan. Uh, you know, so it's not like people weren't mixing. And but I guess the main thing I'm saying, all the discrimination within the tribe itself, because I've seen a lot of people online that, it's like, I'm Yaqui, I grew up in California, and sometimes they're coming up with 50% on their DNA, Sonoran Indigenous, and they're trying to get in the tribe and they can't because they don't know anyone who's enrolled. And if you don't know an enrolled family member, you're pretty much not even going to be able to get an application at this point. I had to go, like I told you yesterday, for my one aunt, and then I have another cousin. I had to get permission for them to mail an enrollment form to them and say, yes, I know this guy. He's my uncle's son. It's like he lived in Tempe, one street away from us, or from my grandparents. It's like, and he's a Yaqui. And he's also, that's the interesting thing with him. I believe he's the one you spoke to uh, on his mother's side. He's an Apache. So, you know, he's got really quite interesting story. I don't know if he tells it or has told it to you, but
Right,
yeah,
right. I remember talking to him through because I found it through Ancestry.com when I was going through the family, the Estradas, because like I was telling you, my grandma, my great grandmother Nana Chavela, her name is Isabella Pasos Estrada. So some kind of way I stumbled upon him through Ancestry.com. And I was like, okay. He was telling me, for like I said, first he said we were cousins, then he said we weren't. We have a close, like, I guess we got a close cousin that we're both related to, or something like that. So it's crazy, but he did say there are Delgados and Estradas that are on the Basque Yaqui rolls, tribal rolls. So he did tell me that. So it's like just trying to find that ancestor that's linked to my family that, you know,
and was he the one? Is he the one from California that you talked
I
to?
think so. I think
Yeah,
yeah,
that's my first cousin.
yeah.
Yeah,
His
my
name
uncle's
is
son.
Carlos Estrada.
Yeah, yeah. And I sent you that stuff about my grandmother's first cousin's sister's funeral, and my grandmother's first cousin, the woman, is a Delgado. That might be her married name. I don't know. But
Hmm.
so, in other words, that's like my Tia. So that's why I sent you that stuff. It's on. I think I highlighted it
Yeah,
because
you
that
showed
at
me.
least is a relationship through the Gonzaleses and the
Gotcha.
Davilas, and here's the thing too: the Davilas and the Gonzaleses are related to the Estradas. And in all my family history and genealogy, it's like, okay, my grandfather married his cousin. My great grandfather married his cousin. My great great grandfather married his cousin. My great 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 grandfather married who was he was think I think he was pure Spaniard still, but he married a Yaqui woman. So that's how the Estradas had their line, you know. So basically, they all married cousins anyway. The third great grandfather was one that didn't. He didn't marry a Spanish woman like all the people before him because they weren't. They were like they came in 1790s. They weren't the Stratas that have been here since 1500s. It's like so they were relatively later immigration with the Basque immigration, and I think it came at the time as the um, let's see, uh, there was the Spanish and then the Basque. And so I've got Basque and Portuguese. I know that, but from if my genealogy is correct, it's like my Estrada's came like in 1790 something. So the first one that came, the man got killed by the Pima Indians. So it's like it was his grandson that married a Yaqui. So there's um, and then there's other Estradas which are DNA matches, but they trace back to different Estradas. It's really interesting when you get into all that because those Spanish records, and I read them in Spanish about 20 times to try and make sure they're clear and concisely translated. Yeah. Um, so also with I know you talked to Carlos. He has other Estradas on his mother's side, which say they're not related to the Estradas on my side. So they go back to a different guy, which I think is from Querétaro or um, I'd have to look that up. I think that's the place he's from, like his kid Edgar in Mexico. He's Nicholas Estrada, but I'm not from him. That's on Carlos's mom's side. I believe it was his his mom's. Well, it's on his mom's side, and on Carlos's mom's side, like he has Apache. So, and the funny thing too with that is like he's Apache through the Sotos, and then I think it's his great grandmother is half sister, or not biological sister, actually stepsister to my great grandfather. So that one's actually not a blood connection there, but it is a stepsister that goes down to Carlos. That was interesting too. But all those people, they pretty much, we used to go when I was a kid over to the Salt River Pima Reservation and visit relatives. And, I would go with my dad. And even when I was a teenager and stuff. And, I knew their relatives and stuff. They're probably in the Salt River tribe, in the Pima tribe. But, um, some were friends, but some, usually the ones we visited were mostly relatives. It's like people mixed. It's like there was no, you know, they weren't all wearing chastity belts and not allowed to mix at all or something.
I got you. Yeah, I understand. So I guess everybody married everybody or made some children with somebody, and that's probably how the peace came and stopped warring because people started to realize, hey, I got a cousin, we can't attack them, you know. But for a while, when the United States government of Mexico, they was taking anybody, and they was, you know what I'm saying, when they was
Oh yeah,
going after the Geronimo and then and
that
different.
was yeah, that was what I wanted to talk about too. Is like over there. Remember, they were taking the Yaquis for slaves and sending them down to the Yucatan.
I read about that. Other Yaquis have told me about that situation.
A lot of the people that they they were taking when they were taking the people then in late 1800s. That's when a lot of the people here from Tempe, Arizona, would go down, with a wagon or whatever they could get, and they'd go get their, relatives. They'd go get people they knew, and they'd get other Yaquis, and they'd bring them back here, and then they would work here on the cotton farms, in Tempe. Uh, and some people, you know, like think, oh well, that was not so good, but well, it was better than being tortured and killed in the Yucatan or tortured and killed in Sonora by the Mexican government. Because Porfirio Diaz, did I say it right? He basically wanted to commit total genocide of Yaquis. Maybe not of every tribe, but at least start with the Yaquis. And that was the plan. It's like send them down, and I don't know if I sent you that article too. Like that's one you read where I
I
mean,
think you might have. If not, if you could send it to me again so I could read it and I could, talk about it when we come back on. And next time that you do come back on, bring more Yaqui people. And, because I do want to make the connection, because some of my family members have said, are you enrolled? And I said, no, I'm not because, I'm still looking for the connection. I've
uh-huh.
talked to the tribe, from time to time. And like they were very very stern, like who are you related to and how much are like they're very like that, but it's a concept that I'm thinking hopefully the newer generation will be like, hey, this blood quantum, it's crazy. I hope they do what Oklahoma realize. Because if not,
Yeah,
they're gonna jokingly have to marry cousins eventually one day, and we don't want that for genetic reasons, to keep the
yeah,
blood high, especially if they like, oh, you gotta be a half or a quarter. Like what do they
uh-huh.
do? Especially
But
if
like
they don't.
I'm a quarter, so my kids are nothing. See, and that's not the way things work in life. If
Right.
if Grandpa has $1 million and lives it to my dad, he leaves me half a million, and I get a quarter million. Guess who's getting the quarter million when I die? My kids. Instead of according to the blood quantum, it's basically sorry you don't get the quarter million because the government said. It's like the government planned this all out. This was not some amateur guy in the back room. It's well orchestrated, and like I was saying yesterday, around 1830s, with the president, with Stonewall Jackson. I've read a lot of stuff. I probably should have made some copies of stuff and updated, but this is purposely orchestrated to regain the reservation land at a later point. And yeah, I've heard about people. I met a cousin from Texas. She's like, "Oh, can I marry you?" I was like, "No, that's not going to make you a Yaqui." You know, and it's like you try and get in with what you have, and if they don't accept you, uh, you know, see what happens. But I believe, from what I heard from the education department 20 whatever years ago when I was working with the tribe in 1997 a lot, working, taking language classes, the Yaqui language classes, working on the language commission. To the education department, someone there told me that Gila River over here where I live in southwest Phoenix and by Levine, the Gila River was going to change to a 1/1 millionth flood quantum. I don't know if they ever did, but the people from the Gila River, from what this person in the education department told me, came and met with the Yaqui tribe and said, "Look, we're going to change to 1/1 million. Send your kids to us because we're sister tribes. We have the same Easter ceremony, the same religion. It's like we're close enough related because your people are going to die out and lose all their rights, you know." So they actually, from what this person in the education department told me back in 1997, they actually did this and offered. And I don't know that anybody went over there and registered their kids as Gila River or not. And um, but they figured it out. They used their brain that the um, the government is not on our side, the federal government.